January 22nd, 1944. Anzio, Italy, 06:40 hours. The sea is still smoking when the first wounded stumble back from the dunes. You can smell it before you see it: cordite, wet sand, burning fuel drifting in from the beachhead. Landing craft lie half-submerged offshore, their ramps blown open, bodies tangled where men were supposed to run. The sky is low and grey, pressing down on everything, as if the weather itself is waiting to see whether this invasion will live or die. Private First Class Daniel Mercer is 19 years old. He is kneeling in the sand behind a wrecked Sherman tank, sleeves rolled past his elbows, hands already slick with blood that is not his own. His medic bag is open beside him, morphine syringes clattering against bandages as his fingers shake, not from fear, but from speed. He has learned that hesitation kills faster than bullets. A runner slides in beside him, breathless. "Orders," the runner says. "All medical personnel are to pull back to Rally Point Baker. Now." Mercer doesn't answer. In front of him, a corporal is trying to breathe through a hole in his chest that wasn't there 10 minutes ago. Each inhale sounds like cloth tearing. Mercer presses down, feels ribs shift under his palm. The corporal's eyes lock onto his. "Don't leave me," the man whispers. Behind them, the German artillery finds its range. Shells begin walking across the sand in slow, deliberate steps. Each explosion throws grit into the air, pelting helmets, slamming into flesh. Men start running past Mercer, rifles abandoned, faces grey, eyes wide. This is no longer an advance. It's a retreat pretending not to be one. The runner shouts again, louder this time. "Medic, that's an order." Mercer finally looks up. He sees something the order doesn't account for. Stretchers are coming back empty because there aren't enough hands to carry the wounded. Platoons are dissolving into clusters of survivors. Officers are nowhere to be seen. Radios lie smashed in the surf, antennas snapped like matchsticks. This isn't just a bad morning. This is a line breaking. Mercer makes a decision that will follow him for the rest of his life. He shakes his head. "Tell them I'm staying." The runner stares at him, stunned. "You'll be overrun." "Then I'll be overrun," Mercer says, already turning back to the corporal. The runner hesitates, then disappears into the smoke. For the next 3 hours, Mercer does not leave that stretch of beach. He drags men out of shell craters. He crawls forward under machine gun fire to reach screams that grow weaker by the minute. He runs out of morphine before he runs out of wounded. When his bandages are gone, he tears strips from his undershirt. When that's gone, he uses anything: socks, scarves, torn webbing. By mid-morning, the tide brings bodies back in. Some are German, most are not. Mercer starts doing something no one trained him to do. He begins counting. Not out of morbid curiosity, but because patterns are emerging. Entire companies coming back shattered. Platoons with no officers. Wounds consistent with artillery fire hitting pre-registered coordinates, as if the enemy knew exactly where the men would land. Every casualty tells a story. Mercer listens. Around 10:15, a captain finally reaches the beach. Captain Harold Whittaker, operations staff, his uniform immaculate compared to the men around him. He crouches beside Mercer, shouting over the shelling. "Why are you still here?" Mercer doesn't salute, he just gestures. "Because they are." Whittaker looks at the wounded piled behind the tank. Dozens now, too many. "Where's your unit?" "Gone," Mercer says, "or scattered." Whittaker frowns. "That's not what division reports." Mercer reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, mud-stained notebook. He has been writing whenever his hands stopped shaking long enough. Times, units, locations, nature of wounds. He hands it to the captain. Whittaker flips through it once, then again slower. His face changes. "These men are from 3 different regiments," Whittaker says quietly. "They shouldn't even be here at the same time." "They were pushed here," Mercer replies, All of them, same direction, same fire. Another shell lands close, too close. Whitaker closes the notebook and looks out toward the dunes. For the first time since dawn, an officer is no longer issuing orders. He is listening. Because if the medic is right, if these casualties represent the truth, then the map in headquarters is a lie. And that means something far worse than disobedience has just occurred. It means the battle may already be lost, and no one in command knows it yet. Whitaker does not return to headquarters right away. Instead, he stays. The two men crouch behind the burned-out Sherman as the beach continues to come apart around them. The captain opens Mercer's notebook again, this time bracing it against the tank's armor, shielding the pages from sand and shrapnel. "Start from the beginning," Whitaker says, slowly. Mercer wipes his hands on his trousers. They leave dark stains that will never fully wash out. "They came in waves," he begins. "Not the landing waves, the wounded. First it was the engineers, then infantry, then armor crews, all moving back, not sideways, back." Whitaker nods, marking something in his own field pad. Mercer points toward the dunes. "Artillery, been hitting pre-registered lines, not searching fire, they knew where to aim." Another explosion punctuates his words, "Closer inland now. German guns adjusting, tightening the noose." A sergeant is dragged in by two privates. His left leg is gone below the knee, the tourniquet already soaked through. Mercer drops back into motion, efficient, almost mechanical. He talks while he works. Radio lines are cut. Officers are dead or missing. Men say counterattacks were ordered, then never came. Whitaker looks up sharply. "Which units?" 36th Texas, 45th Division, Rangers from the left flank. "That shouldn't be possible." On Whitaker's map, those units are holding firm, pushing inland, meeting only light resistance. The German defenses are supposed to be thin, disorganized. That was the entire premise of Anzio: land behind the Gustav Line, force the enemy to retreat. Mercer tightens a bandage and meets the captain's eyes. "They aren't retreating," he says, "they're waiting." As if on cue, the sound of German machine guns rises, not chaotic, but controlled, short bursts, disciplined, defensive fire. Whitaker's jaw tightens. "Why didn't anyone report this?" Mercer hesitates. "Maybe they tried," he says. "Maybe the messages never made it out." The beachhead was supposed to be temporary, radios were limited, command posts improvised. Everyone assumed the line would move forward before those weaknesses mattered. But the line didn't move. It stalled. By noon, the wounded are no longer trickling back. They are flooding. Men are being carried on doors ripped from Italian houses, on tarps, on their comrades' backs. Some aren't wounded at all, just broken, eyes glassy, mouths opening and closing as if they've forgotten how to speak. Mercer notices something else now. The wounds are changing. Early in the morning, it was shrapnel. Later, machine gun fire. Now he sees something worse, blast injuries from concentrated artillery strikes inland. Which means German guns are no longer just hitting the beach. They are hitting assembly areas. They are shaping the battlefield. Whitaker finally makes his decision. He takes Mercer's notebook and stands, hunched low, waiting for a lull between shell bursts. He grips Mercer's shoulder. "You come with me." Mercer blinks. "Sir, I can't." "That wasn't a request." They move fast, zigzagging between craters, past men too wounded to move, past others who are already beyond help. Mercer feels each step pulling him away from something unfinished. Command is set up in a half-ruined farmhouse a few hundred yards inland. Sandbags stacked hastily, radios humming, maps spread across tables, still clean, still hopeful. Inside, the air smells of coffee and paper, a different world entirely. Lieutenant General John P. Lucas is bent over the main map when Whitaker bursts in. Sir, you need to see this. Lucas looks up, irritation already forming. Captain, I'm in the middle of. Whitaker places Mercer's notebook on the table. Lucas flips through it once, dismissively. Then again. Slower. The room grows quiet. This can't be right, Lucas says. These units are reported as holding. Whitaker gestures toward Mercer. He's been treating them since first light. Lucas studies the medic, 19 years old, mud-streaked, hands still trembling slightly. You disobeyed a withdrawal order, Lucas says. Yes, sir, Mercer replies. He does not look away. Lucas exhales through his nose. Why? Mercer swallows. Because they kept coming back, he says, and because no one else was listening. Silence. One of the staff officers clears his throat. Sir, if these casualty flows are accurate. Lucas finishes the sentence for him. Then the Germans aren't reacting to us, he says quietly. They're controlling us. The realization hits the room like a delayed explosion. Maps are adjusted, reports cross-checked. A radio operator frantically tries to raise forward units. Static answers him. Lucas straightens. How long have they known? He asks no one in particular. Whitaker answers, long enough to prepare. Lucas looks back down at the map of Italy, at the neat arrows pointing confidently inland. For the first time since the landing, those arrows feel like a lie drawn in ink. He closes Mercer's notebook. Get me army group, Lucas says, now. Outside, the shelling intensifies. And on the beach, the wounded are still coming. Unaware that far from the sand, a general has just begun to understand that the battle he thought he was fighting is not the one unfolding in front of him. The radio refuses to cooperate. Static bursts of clipped voices, coordinates repeated, then lost. Somewhere between the beach and headquarters, the fragile web of communication is fraying faster than anyone can repair it. General Lucas stands motionless over the map table, fingers pressed flat against the paper as if he can physically hold the front line in place. Around him, staff officers begin moving with forced calm, adjusting markers, rechecking reports, speaking in low, careful tones. No one says the word yet. Retreat. Outside the farmhouse, German artillery continues its steady rhythm, not the wild firing of a panicked enemy, but methodical, measured fire, suppression, interdiction, control. Lucas turns to Whitaker. Where exactly did these men say they came from? Whitaker answers without hesitation. Multiple fallback routes, sir, all converging toward the beach. Lucas nods slowly. That should not be happening, not if the offensive is intact, not if the Germans are still uncertain of Allied intentions. He looks at Mercer again. Walk me through it, Lucas says, from your position. Mercer hesitates. He is painfully aware of where he stands, inside a command post, surrounded by senior officers, maps, authority. He has no rank here, no credentials beyond blood on his hands and a notebook filled with scribbles. But the general is watching him. Mercer clears his throat. Sir, they weren't falling back in order. No bounding movement, no covering fire. Men were running because the ground behind them was killing them. Lucas's expression tightens. What kind of fire? Artillery, machine guns locking down exits, mortars hitting assembly points. It felt like the Germans knew where the units would go before they went there. One of the intelligence officers stiffens. That suggests pre-planned defensive zones. Yes, Mercer says, and we walked straight into them. The room goes very still. Lucas turns back to the map. He traces the planned advance routes inland, roads, olive groves, shallow ridgelines. All of it makes sense on paper. All of it assumes an enemy reacting in confusion. But the casualty flow tells a different story. Lucas gestures sharply. Get me air reconnaissance, now. A staff officer hesitates. Sir, weather's poor and Luftwaffe activity. Now. Minutes stretch, the artillery outside creeps closer, dust drifts from the ceiling with every concussion. When the reconnaissance report finally arrives, it is worse than expected. German armor dug in, not moving. Defensive lines established days earlier. Not reacting. Waiting. Lucas reads the report twice, then he closes his eyes for a moment longer than necessary. This was not supposed to happen. Anzio was meant to be a surprise, a bold stroke, a maneuver to unhinge the Gustav line and force a German withdrawal from central Italy. Instead, the Allies have landed in a bowl, low ground surrounded by higher terrain, and the enemy has sealed the rim. Lucas opens his eyes. "We're not advancing," he says quietly. "We are contained." The staff officers exchange glances. Containment means time favors the Germans. Time means reinforcements, heavy guns, counterattacks. Time means casualties. Outside, a distant rumble grows louder, not artillery. Tanks. Lucas looks to the doorway. "How long before they counterattack in force?" he asks. The intelligence officer answers carefully. "Hours, sir, maybe less." Lucas nods once. Then he says it. "We hold." The room exhales. Holding means digging in. It means abandoning the illusion of breakthrough. It means admitting, at least to themselves, that the battle has turned defensive. Lucas looks back at Mercer. "You probably saved lives by staying," he says, "but you also brought me bad news faster than I wanted it." Mercer doesn't know how to respond. "I didn't mean to." "I know," Lucas interrupts. "That's the problem." A messenger bursts in. "Sir, German infantry probing the left flank." Lucas straightens, all hesitation gone. "Order the engineers to fortify immediately. All units dig in. Artillery repositioned for defensive fire." He pauses, then adds, "And get medical stations closer to the line. We are going to need them." Mercer feels a cold weight settle in his stomach. This isn't a pause. This is the beginning of a siege. Lucas turns to Whittaker. "Get that medic back to where he was." Whittaker nods. As Mercer turns to leave, Lucas speaks again. "Private." Mercer stops. "You did your duty," Lucas says, "even when it wasn't your duty." Mercer salutes, awkward, unsure, and runs back toward the beach. Behind him, the map remains on the table, but now it has been altered, defensive lines drawn where arrows once pointed forward. The battle has not been officially declared lost. But in that farmhouse, the truth is already understood. The question now is how many men will pay for that realization before the world hears about it. By late afternoon, the beachhead has changed its posture. What was supposed to be a brief pause before a breakout has hardened into something else entirely. Shovels bite into wet Italian soil. Sandbags are dragged into place. Engineers string wire where infantry were meant to pass through at a run. Mercer returns to the shoreline just as the first organized German counterattack begins to test the perimeter. The wounded come faster now. Not in chaotic waves, but in steady, punishing rhythm. Men hit while digging, men hit while carrying wire, men hit while trying to pretend they are not afraid. Artillery bursts are timed to catch stretcher teams mid-movement. Mercer works until his hands cramp. He barely registers the hours passing. Only the changing quality of light tells him time is moving forward. The gray sky darkens, shadows lengthen, smoke thickens. Somewhere inland, German tanks fire methodically. Each shot is followed by screams, then silence. A lieutenant collapses near Mercer's station, clutching his abdomen. Mercer recognizes him, Lieutenant James Carter, one of the few officers who had made it off the beach with his unit intact that morning. "They're probing," Carter gasps, "not pushing, just feeling." Mercer nods, pressing gauze against the wound. "That's worse." Carter manages a weak smile. You catch on quick. As night approaches, the firing changes again. Less artillery, more small arms. The Germans are close now. Flares rise over the beachhead, turning night into brief, blinding daylight. Each flare freezes men in place, medics mid-step, soldiers half-crouched, before darkness slams back down. Mercer drags a wounded private into a shallow trench as machine gun fire scythes the sand behind them. "You hear that?" the private whispers. Mercer listens. Not the guns, the pauses between them. The Germans are conserving ammunition, coordinating, they are confident. By midnight, Mercer has treated men from nearly every division involved in the landing. The pattern he noticed in the morning has only deepened. Same routes, same kill zones, same story. At headquarters, General Lucas does not sleep. He studies reports by lantern light, the weight of command settling heavier with every hour. He knows now that the initiative is gone, that the Germans have achieved exactly what they want, a contained enemy, vulnerable to artillery, unable to maneuver. And he knows something else. The casualty figures are climbing faster than anyone predicted. At 02:30, Lucas receives confirmation. German reinforcements from Rome are on the move. He closes his eyes briefly. By dawn, the beachhead will be under sustained pressure. Back on the sand, Mercer feels exhaustion creeping in like a second enemy. His hands move more slowly. His thoughts blur at the edges. He forces himself to drink water that tastes like rust. A stretcher team arrives carrying a man too still to be alive. Mercer checks anyway. Nothing. He pulls the blanket over the man's face. For the first time that day, Mercer feels something break inside him. Not fear. Anger. At orders that made no sense. At maps that lied. At a battle that turned men into numbers before anyone admitted the truth. As dawn approaches, a runner arrives with new instructions. Medical personnel are to prepare for mass casualties. The counterattack is coming. Mercer looks out toward the dark inland hills. Somewhere beyond them, German officers are finalizing plans drawn days earlier. This fight was decided before he ever disobeyed an order. All he did was see it first. And soon, everyone else will see it too. January 23, 1944, 05:12 hours. The first shells land before sunrise. They do not walk in gradually. They arrive all at once, a coordinated hammer blow across the entire beachhead. Artillery flashes ripple along the ridgelines inland, like a row of cameras capturing the moment of impact. The ground shakes. Men wake, already running. Mercer is thrown to his knees as a shell detonates close enough to lift him off his feet. Sand rains down. His ears ring. Somewhere nearby, a man screams and does not stop. German infantry advances behind the barrage. Not charging, advancing. They move in short bounds, covered by machine guns set up the night before. Mortars drop rounds into trenches with cruel precision. This is not desperation. This is doctrine. Mercer barely has time to drag the first wounded man into cover before the second arrives, then the third, then 5 at once. Stretcher teams break apart under fire. Men crawl on their elbows, some never make it. A corporal collapses in front of Mercer, eyes wide, hands shaking. "They're everywhere," he says. "They knew where we'd dig." Mercer doesn't correct him. Of course they did. By mid-morning, the casualty stations are overwhelmed. Morphine runs out again. Plasma bags are rationed to those with a chance, an unspoken rule that eats at Mercer's gut every time he applies it. He begins marking helmets with chalk. Not names. Numbers. At headquarters, General Lucas listens to reports that confirm his worst fears. German armor has joined the infantry. The beachhead perimeter bends inward but does not break, yet. He orders reserves forward, knowing they will arrive under fire. The map on the table is now crowded with defensive notations. There is no room left for arrows pointing forward. At 10:40, a runner brings news from the left flank. The line is buckling. Lucas grips the edge of the table. He knows what comes next. If the Germans punch through, the beachhead could collapse entirely. He orders artillery to fire defensively, closer than doctrine allows. Danger close, the fire direction officer warns. I know, Lucas replies. Better wounded by your own guns than overrun. Back on the sand, Mercer feels the shockwaves as Allied artillery opens up behind him. The explosions are closer now, friendly. Men flinch anyway. A private grabs Mercer's sleeve. Is this it? Mercer meets his eyes. He wants to say no. Instead, he says, stay down. Hours blur together. At some point in the afternoon, the German advance slows, not because the Allies are winning, but because they have reached the limits of what they intended to take that day. The probing has become pressure. Pressure has become attrition. By evening, the line holds barely. The beachhead survives. But survival comes at a cost. Mercer sits against a sandbag wall as night falls, hands resting uselessly in his lap for the first time in 24 hours. He stares at them, trying to remember when they were clean. A chaplain sits beside him, says nothing. They watch flares rise and fall. Somewhere inland, German guns continue firing unhurried. At headquarters, Lucas writes his report. He chooses his words carefully. He does not say defeat. He does not say failure. He writes containment, heavy resistance, defensive posture. But he knows the breakthrough will not come from Anzio. Not now. Not this way. As Mercer finally closes his eyes, exhausted beyond thought, the truth settles in. The battle was not lost in a single moment. It was lost in the quiet hours before dawn, when the wounded began coming back, and no one wanted to hear what they were saying. January 24th, 1944, 03:55 hours. The beach is quiet now, but only because the wounded have stopped coming. For Mercer, this is no relief. Silence is worse than gunfire. Every cough, every distant footstep makes him jump. Every shadow might hide another man in need or another enemy creeping closer. He checks his bag for the 100th time. Bandages are gone, morphine is gone, even water is nearly gone, nothing left but adrenaline and resolve. He feels hollow and full at the same time, hollow from exhaustion, full from the knowledge that he may have just prevented a disaster. At headquarters, General Lucas paces. He hasn't slept, not properly, not since Mercer handed him that mud-stained notebook. Maps and reports cover the table in front of him like a battlefield of ink and paper. He listens to incoming radio traffic, cross-checking Mercer's observations with every report that makes it through. Finally, he makes a decision. He calls Captain Whittaker and orders him to find Mercer. He needs to see the medic, not as a subordinate, not as a 19-year-old, but as the man who just delivered the most crucial intelligence the command had all morning. When Mercer enters the farmhouse, Lucas is waiting. He does not rise to meet him. He does not offer the words you might expect, well done or thank you. He simply gestures to a chair. Mercer sits. The two men face each other in silence, punctuated by the distant echo of artillery and the faint murmur of exhausted soldiers outside. Lucas finally speaks, quietly, almost to himself. You saw what no one else would. Mercer shifts uncomfortably. Sir, I was just doing my job. No, Lucas says, leaning forward. You disobeyed an order. You stayed when you weren't supposed to. And yet, you've done more for this beachhead than anyone else today. He reaches for Mercer's notebook. These records, they saved lives. They exposed the collapse before it could cascade further. Command would have been blind without them. Mercer swallows. I just treated the wounded, sir. I didn't plan anything. Lucas studies him, a rare softness crossing his usually steely face. Planning isn't what matters here. recognition is, and sometimes seeing clearly is the only plan that works. Outside, the first hints of dawn streak across the horizon. Flares from the night are gone. Smoke rises from scattered fires, curling upward in thin grey ribbons. Men who survived huddle in shallow trenches, some awake, some barely conscious. The wounded lie on stretchers or in craters, silent but alive. Lucas looks out at them. His voice carries now, firm, decisive. This battle isn't over, but thanks to Private Mercer, we know exactly what we are facing. Mercer feels a shiver, not from cold, but from understanding. The battle is not over, but for the first time, someone in command truly knows the battlefield as it is. And for the first time, Mercer feels the weight of his choice shift. He is no longer just a 19-year-old medic following instinct. He is a witness to a truth no one else saw, a truth that may have just kept hundreds of men alive. Yet even as dawn breaks, Mercer knows that recognition is not the end of struggle. Every new day brings more wounded, more chaos, more decisions. And in the Italian sun, the line between obedience and necessity remains blurred, fragile, and dangerous. The medic rises, Lucas nods. No words are needed, they both understand what comes next. Mercer steps back toward the beach, toward the waiting wounded, toward the ongoing battle. Each step reminds him that the fight is far from over. But this time, he walks with a measure of clarity, the rare clarity of a 19-year-old who saw the truth when no one else could. Outside, the beach hums with quiet tension, and somewhere inland, German commanders finalize the next move, unaware that one young medic has already changed the course of their day. The dawn of Anzio feels colder, harsher, but Mercer walks into it resolutely. For the men who survived, and for the ones who will not, he carries the knowledge that even in chaos, courage and clarity can make all the difference.